wind carried a low murmur through the cornfield, a sound that never quite settled, always shifting, like whispers in the dark. The moon, swollen and pale, hung motionless above the land, its cold glow making the dry corn stalks look like brittle bones reaching for the sky. James trudged along the dirt road leading to his grandfather's farmhouse. His boots crunched against loose gravel, the rhythmic sound unnerving in the vast silence surrounding him. His car had broken down a mile back, battery completely dead, and with no cell service, there was no choice but to walk. Something about the night felt wrong. He remembered this road well from childhood summers spent on the farm, but now, it felt stretched. Longer than it should be. The house, a silhouette in the distance, was dark. No porch light. No welcoming glow from inside. Just black windows, staring. James stopped. His breath puffed white in the cold air. Perched atop a wooden fence post near the edge of the cornfield, an owl watched him. Perfectly still. Its golden eyes reflected the moonlight, glowing unnaturally bright. He swallowed hard. It wasn't just watching, it was studying him. Something about the way its head tilted made James uneasy. The wind shifted. The corn stalks swayed in unison. Except for one spot. A single row, further down, remained completely still. James turned, scanning the rows. Nothing. The stalks stood tall, their dry husks whispering against each other. The darkness between them felt too deep. He quickened his pace, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. The wood groaned under his weight. The sound too loud in the quiet night. The moment he touched the door handle, a shiver ran up his spine. The house should have been warm, but as soon as he stepped inside, the air was stale. Still. As if the house had been untouched for weeks. "Grandpa," James called. Silence. The kitchen was exactly as he remembered it, down to the outdated floral wallpaper. But something was off. A plate lay overturned on the table. A fork on the floor. A full coffee cup sat untouched, cold. James frowned. His grandfather was a creature of habit, always up before dawn, always clearing the table. He turned toward the window. James's breath hitched. He wasn't imagining it. There, just beyond the fence, something moved between the rows. A shape, too tall, too thin, slipping between the corn stalks with jerky, unnatural movements. His fingers tightened around the flashlight in his pocket. Then, James's stomach twisted. He turned his head slowly. The owl was now perched just outside the glass. But something was wrong. Its beak was moving. The sound wasn't right. It was too human. James took a step back. His pulse pounded against his ribs. Then, the owl was gone. Something darted past the window. James bolted for the door. He threw it open, rushing onto the porch, the flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The cornfield swayed violently, though there was no wind. Then, the rows parted. A figure emerged. James froze. It was wrong. Its limbs were too long, its joints slightly out of place. Its head was tilted at an odd angle, as if studying him. Its body was wrapped in something dark and tattered, but it moved like it wasn't fabric at all. James stepped back, gripping the railing. Then, it moved. Not walking. Not running. It just shifted. One moment, 10 feet away. The next, 5. James stumbled backward into the house and slammed the door shut. He had to find his grandfather. He tore through the house, rushing up the stairs 2 at a time. His grandfather's bedroom was empty. The bed was unmade. The window, open. James's stomach twisted. Had he gone outside? Then, he saw it. A note on the desk. In his grandfather's shaky handwriting, it read, "It can't see you in the dark." James turned sharply. The floor outside the room creaked. Then, from the darkness beyond the doorway, a whisper. James. His blood ran cold. James raised the flashlight and aimed it at the hallway. The beam landed on something standing just beyond the light. It had no face. Just a smooth, featureless stretch of pale skin where eyes should have been. James turned off the flashlight. He stood frozen in the dark, heart hammering. The hallway was silent. Then, the entity was moving toward him. James clenched his fists. He couldn't see it, but it couldn't see him either. Unless... James's stomach dropped. It wasn't blind. It could smell him. Panic shot through him. He had seconds. He lunged toward the window and threw himself out. Pain exploded through his ribs, but he ignored it, pushing himself up. The owl's hoot rang out again, closer. Urgent. James stumbled into a clearing, and stopped dead. The rows of corn ahead were parted. Not trampled. Opened. A dark path stretched far beyond the reach of his flashlight. And at the end of that path, a shadow waited. James turned sharply. There were more. Figures stood between the corn stalks, barely outlined in the dark. Silent. Motionless. Watching. The last thing James saw was the first entity tilting its head, as if smiling without a mouth. Then, darkness.